Why India is opening nuclear power to the private players, what has changed in India's nuclear liability law, and how this SHANTI Bill not just impacts the nuclear power but also the renewable energy sector. For decades, India's nuclear power sector remained tightly in the control by the state. But the SHANTI Bill of 2025 is going to take a decisive shift towards not just private participation but also foreign participation. Hello everyone, welcome to Vajram and Ravi's Flash News. My name is Shubhangi Singh and today we are going to understand that what SHANTI Bill 2025 brings on the table for the nuclear power sector, why it was needed, what are the changes that are being proposed, and what are the dimensions around it. So let us begin with understanding that what exactly is this SHANTI Bill and how it is associated with nuclear power sector. So when we are talking about the term that has been coined here, SHANTI, it is basically meant to be sustainable harnessing and advancement of nuclear energy for transforming India. And the reason it has been introduced, because if we talk about India's nuclear power sector, for the longest time it has remained state controlled. If we talk about the first industrial policies that have come out since then till today, it remains one of those sectors that have not gone out of state control, be it 1956 or be it the present times. And that is why we also see that it has remained pretty much stagnant. If we talk about private participation and foreign participation, that has been excessively limited because of the strict liability laws that have been in place. And the whole idea to introduce this bill is the fact that government wants to expand clean energy, get more potential harnessed from nuclear energy and improve grid stability, and most importantly with two of these to meet the long-term climate commitments that we have put in place. So in order to address the limitations in the potential of nuclear sector, this bill has been brought in. And when we talk about this whole bill, it is going to revamp that how nuclear power sector was regulated, because it is going to replace the Atomic Energy Act of 1962. It is also going to change the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act, that is CLND Act of 2010, and directly open the nuclear sector for private and foreign participation. Now, before I move into the key provisions of this whole changes, that the reforms that are being proposed, let us start with understanding that why this reform was very much needed at this present time. Let us try to understand this through some data in front of us. So when we talk about the nuclear energy sector, we get to see that as of now the installed capacity is around 8.8 gigawatts. And this particular capacity provides only 1.5% share in the total installed capacity that we have. Furthermore, if you look at another number, that the electricity generation that in our country that is still heavily coal dependent, in that the contribution of nuclear energy is miserably low, that is 3%. And when nuclear energy has so much potential to actually change these numbers and contribute to the targets such as 100 gigawatt nuclear capacity by 2047. So if you look at it, when we are talking about 100 gigawatt and we are at 8.8 gigawatt, we are planning to change this number in next 11 years. Furthermore, we are also targeting net zero emissions by 2070. And this is where nuclear energy, which is a clean source of energy, can actually contribute in a great way. So in order to change these numbers and contribute to the long-term targets that have been set by India, this was a needed way to give impetus to the movement of the nuclear energy sector that we have seen, which has remained pretty stagnant across the several decades in which it has remained state controlled. So we want to change how the regulation is done so that the participation enhances, so that the output enhances, and we are able to achieve the targets that lie in front of us. Furthermore, another thing that needs to be understood right here is that when we are talking about achieving the targets, there have been certain key challenges associated around it. For example, the high capital cost. When we are talking about the high capital cost, we already understand that whenever the capital costs are higher, it is usually the government that steps in to take that up. Private will only come when it gets the profits. So, if you want to ensure more private participation, either you have to reduce this capital cost or you have to ensure better profit. Another scenario that was a challenge, that was land acquisition, and most importantly the waste disposal issue. Furthermore, the global tragedies and the accidents such as Chernobyl, Fukushima, or even if not in context with nuclear tragedies but involved with chemical plants, if you remember Bhopal gas tragedy in our own country, we get to understand that it has a lot of things at stake. And most importantly, where private participation and foreign participation was limited was around the legal uncertainty and also unlimited liability fears. So, if there the liability is extreme, this is where the private sector would easily opt out. And because of this, we saw a nuclear sector that was stagnant. The foreign suppliers or the private players, they clearly stayed away, because as per the earlier provisions, the liability was not just on operators, suppliers were also part of the liability, and this also remained an obstacle in the clean energy transition that India kept aiming. And in order to address this, the SHANTI Bill has come out. Now let us move to understand that what are the key changes and the key provisions introduced in this bill, which is trying to address these challenges, and let us also understand that how much of these challenges would be addressed and what criticism and concerns are also around the table in regards with this particular bill. So let us start with the first dimension, that is the structural as well as institutional change that has been brought with the bill. So when we are talking about the first key provision, what they have done, they have directly ended the state monopoly. Before this, it was only NPCIL, that is Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited, which could operate the nuclear power plants. Now this has been changed in the SHANTI Bill. Now the operation can be done by Indian private firms also, and foreign companies are also permitted to join in, but that would be subject to the conditions and the approvals will be brought in from the government. So this is where the monopoly that was exercised by a government company, it has been finally ended in the nuclear power sector, and that means there will be certain regulatory changes which will be brought in, because if we are allowing the private companies, we will place in a regulation to make sure that the sector was suffering from is taken away, but the safety and also the productivity is ensured. So in this context, what has been done, that AERB, that is Atomic Energy Regulatory Board, that will be given a statutory status, and that is why AERB will be answerable to the parliament and not the executive. That means a proper answerability and accountability will come in this particular regulatory body. And it is given designated responsibilities such as nuclear safety, radiation protection, emergency preparedness, and also quality assurance. That means a platform has been created, a regulatory body has been put in place, and state monopoly has been ended. That means any investor who might be interested in this sector will have better confidence because of proper regulation that has been in place. And at the same time, when we want more participation, we are not compromising on the safety, we are ensuring safety oversight with privatization in this particular sector. Now, structural and institutional reform has been this. The second major reform that has been brought in is about the nuclear liability law. So when we talk about the earlier act, that is Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act of 2010, this was the system according to which the victims had to be compensated, and that compensation came from the nuclear operator. But there was another provision in which the operator can claim recourse from suppliers as well. That means there was liability that was on suppliers. And the civil courts had the jurisdiction of such particular cases. So that means if any foreign supplier is involved or private supplier is also involved in this situation, they can be caught up in long-term legal battles. They would have to pay for the compensation and they don't know in what and which form the compensation will exist. So the private players and foreign players feared the long legal battles and unlimited liability. That is why we saw limited participation of the private sector, least interested, and also multiple deals, be it with US, France, Japan, they have been stalled for the longest time. And that is why in the new bill, it has been assured that the supplier liability has been completely removed. The whole and sole responsibility lies on the operator, and this is where with this change, India is going to be placed on the similar framework that global norms have. Now to detail out what the changes have been introduced, in order to address the liability has been capped. So when we are talking about the liability, it has been brought in limits, so as to make sure that whoever is the participant, investor, the company, person, they have an understanding of the predictable liability that can come upon them. The issue was initially unlimited liability. So in order to change that, they have brought it into the lens of predictable liability. And how they have done it? They have done it by capping it. Based on the size of plant, liability has been mentioned, maximum liability. For example, if there is a very large plant, more than 3600 megawatts, the maximum liability that will be on the operator will be of 3000 crores. So that means the operator has a clear predictability. He knows that this is the maximum limit of liability that can come upon me. Similarly, the medium plants which are in between 1500 to 3600 megawatts, they have the liability of 1500 crores, and small modular reactors or the small plants which are around 150 megawatts to almost 1500 megawatts, they have maximum liability of 100 crores. So in order to bring a proper understanding and predictability which will boost investor confidence, this has been done. There has been a proper mention for penalty if there are any legal violations. If there is any severe breach, then maximum fine has also been set. At the same time, when the whole idea is to make the sector conducive for participation, there are certain criticism as well around the capping liability limit. Is the fact in this scenario, the compensation is not linked to actual damage, it is just linked to a random number, and in this particular scenario, there is a possibility where victims might be undercompensated as well. Now that we have understood that what are the provisions, now let us also look into that why government and what reasons government is giving for bringing in these reforms. So if we look at government's rationale and the benefits they are pitching, they are starting it off with energy security. They are saying that nuclear energy is one source of clean energy which gives 24/7 base load power. If you talk about solar energy, wind energy, these are the ones which will not be able to provide 24/7 base load power. They will be limited based on the geographical conditions, be it the solar light, be it the wind speed. Nuclear power does not has this limitation. So we need nuclear power to support these forms of nuclear energy. Second, when we are talking about climate action and the long-term targets in our place, we have to ensure that the clean energy sources that we are talking about, they have very low carbon emissions, and nuclear energy is the answer here, and this is the one which will facilitate to achieve the net zero target by 2070. Other than that, government is also pitching and giving in the rationale that this will be giving a direct boost to not just technology but also economy in form of small modular reactors, indigenous manufacturing, enhanced technology, nuclear plants, and also technology and innovation that will come with it. And it will also help us in reviving the deals that have been stalled for the longest time, and it will be a different directional push in the foreign policy, be it with US, France and Japan in form of civil nuclear deals. That means it will reduce our dependence on Russia, which is the only country has been contributing to India's nuclear power sector, be it the Kudankulam plant. And this is where India is also trying to reduce the dependence, bring in the strategic autonomy and their own strategic interests in the primary place. And overall, this will enhance India's image as a responsible nuclear power which is using nuclear energy for the safe and civilian purposes in the long term. Now, in this context, when we are understanding the strategic benefits, it is also rational to look into the concerns and the criticism that lie in front of us. So, the first thing that has been highlighted in form of criticism, that how this bill is leading to dilution of accountability. When we are talking about regulation and putting cap in terms of liability limits, the accountability of the operators, suppliers, it is being diluted. When we are talking about profits, we are privatizing profit, but we are socializing the risk. We are bringing the risk, especially when we are talking about disposal of waste. The accidents that are possible around nuclear power plants, they are huge. And that is when the fear of anything like Bhopal gas tragedy and the injustice that rolled after looks close when we are normalizing and socializing the risks. Furthermore, there are certain angles related to governance issues. For example, when we are talking about a regulatory body, we will see centralization of power. There will be limited public consultation because of involvement of private and foreign participation. And there has been a recent demand to refer the bill to the standing committee to get a more detailed understanding on this. Now, what are your thoughts on this? In which direction do you think this bill should be going? What kind of consideration should be given? And what are the suggestions that you would want to put? Let me know in the comment section. I'll be leaving you with a practice question here. You can put down your answers in the comment section. I'll be revealing the answer in the upcoming videos.